David Allan Coe was in a reform school at age 9, and in and out of prison most of his adult life.
I knew I was going to be a success at something. I was either going to be a professional bank robber or a professional singer.
For decades, the name David Allan Coe has been surrounded by a fog of myth, controversy, and larger-than-life stories. His outlaw persona, shaped as much by whispered tales as by his gravelly music, always left room for speculation. Fans and critics alike have speculated about everything from secret affiliations to mysterious prison stints, some of which seemed implausible even by rock and roll standards. But among all the mysteries circling his name, one stood out more than the rest. A persistent, murky story that many dismissed as folklore, the mystery of a lost recording session that was said to reveal a completely different side of Coe, one hidden beneath the brash exterior of the man who once sang of rebellion and darkness. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. That long whispered mystery, surprisingly, has finally been solved. And the truth is not just unexpected, it's shocking. The story begins in the late 1970s, a time when Coe was at the height of his outlaw country fame. Riding the wave alongside Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, and Willie Nelson, Coe's unapologetic lyrics and raw persona earned him a dedicated cult following. But behind the scenes, something else was unfolding. In 1978, sources now confirm, Coe recorded an entire album's worth of material at a secluded studio in Louisiana, an album unlike anything he had ever produced. This wasn't the usual gritty, whiskey-soaked storytelling. It wasn't laced with the crude edge or the unapologetic tone that had defined his outlaw status. Instead, these songs were introspective, spiritual, even vulnerable. They bore no resemblance to his public persona. What makes this revelation so extraordinary is not merely the existence of the music, but the secrecy around it. The sessions were never documented in the usual recording logs. No credits, no studio mentions, no producers listed. The master tapes were reportedly stored in a locked vault under a pseudonym, untraceable by fans, researchers, or even former colleagues. Rumors over the years occasionally mentioned the Cedar Sessions, a phrase that had become almost a ghost story in music circles, spoken of in hushed tones, always denied, never confirmed. For years, the enigma persisted. Why would David Allan Coe, of all people, record something so wildly different and then bury it? Theories abounded. Some said it was a personal project meant only for himself. Others claimed it was a contractual conflict. A few even suggested that Coe was attempting to reinvent himself after a spiritual experience but lost his nerve. But now, at last, the mystery has been cracked wide open. Earlier this year, a former sound engineer who worked on numerous outlaw country albums in the 70s came forward. Now in his 80s and with no stake in preserving industry secrets, he revealed that he had personally been involved in the Cedar Sessions. Not only had he engineered the tracks, but he had also been instructed by Coe himself not to mention the sessions to anyone. According to the engineer, Coe had arrived at the studio for what was initially pitched as a routine recording block. But instead of his usual band, he came alone, carrying only a notebook and a guitar. Over 5 nights, he recorded 12 songs, each one slower, more thoughtful, and radically different than anything else in his catalog. One song reportedly explored the pain of lost fatherhood. Another delved into the guilt he felt over some of his past choices, both in life and in music. There was a track in which he reflected on his time in prison, far less sensationalized than the tales he told in interviews, and another that considered the nature of forgiveness, not just from others, but from himself. These weren't commercial songs. They weren't meant for stadium sing-alongs. They were confessions, set to melody. But then, just as suddenly as it began, it ended. Coe left the studio after the final session, reportedly saying only that the tapes should be kept safe. The engineer held on to the recordings for years, even after the studio shut down. In the mid-1990s, when interest in vintage outlaw recordings began to spike, he considered coming forward but feared legal repercussions, and in his words, felt it wasn't my story to tell. That changed when a journalist researching a separate project about outlaw country myths stumbled upon a handwritten note in an old studio log referencing Cedar, DC personal project. The name wasn't spelled out, but the initials were unmistakable. The journalist tracked down the engineer, verified the tapes, and together they listened to them. Unmixed, untouched, and utterly raw. What they heard changed the understanding of David Allan Coe forever. Here was a man stripped of all pretenses, allowing his real voice, not the outlaw caricature, to take center stage. The songs revealed an artist grappling with his own mythology, trying to claw his way back to something real, something unadorned. The implications of this discovery are enormous. For one, it challenges the public image Coe so carefully cultivated. The man known for raunchy lyrics, offensive album titles, and a devil-may-care attitude was capable of extraordinary emotional depth. The Cedar Sessions show a duality that fans had only guessed at. That beneath the brashness, there was a deeply introspective songwriter capable of exploring themes of remorse, redemption, and even tenderness. It also raises serious questions about the nature of performance personas in music. Coe, like many artists, constructed a public identity that often overshadowed the man himself. But unlike his peers, he never allowed glimpses behind the curtain. Cash had his spiritual awakenings, Willie had his meditations on peace and aging, Jennings had moments of regret. But Coe remained steadfastly outrageous, never deviating from the path. Now it turns out that may have been a deliberate shield. The shocking part isn't just that the Cedar Sessions exist, it's that Coe never attempted to integrate this side of himself into his career. At a time when artistic reinvention could have expanded his reach or reshaped his legacy, he chose silence. He chose to keep these songs hidden, possibly fearing how they would be received. Or perhaps he didn't think he deserved to share them. That kind of self-censorship is rare in an industry that rewards rawness and pain. It suggests a level of inner conflict that fans never imagined. Even more puzzling is the way this revelation reframes his controversial choices. Some have long defended Coe's more offensive work as satire or provocation, while others saw it as genuinely harmful. But if this other Coe existed all along, a man who pondered the moral weight of his actions, then it implies those choices weren't careless. They were calculated, maybe even a form of armor. He wasn't just acting out, he was hiding in plain sight. From a cultural standpoint, the unveiling of the Cedar Sessions may force a re-evaluation of outlaw country itself. The genre was built on rebellion, yes, but also on truth. The mythos of the outlaw has always been about laying bare the hard, ugly, complicated parts of life. Yet here was one of its architects withholding the most honest work of his career. In doing so, Coe subverted the very ethos he helped define. And in a strange way, that makes the revelation even more potent. It's not just about lost music, it's about confronting the gap between who we pretend to be and who we really are. There's also an undeniable emotional weight to the idea that Coe recorded these songs in solitude. It's haunting to imagine a man so famously loud and confrontational sitting alone with his guitar, recording elegies to a life not yet lived, or maybe already lost. There's a particular track, according to the journalist, that seems to recount an apology to an unnamed son. The lyrics, stark and unembellished, speak of missed birthdays and broken promises. No theatrics, no metaphor, just a man confessing his failures to the void. That kind of honesty, when finally exposed, can shift perceptions permanently. It doesn't erase the controversies or sanitize the offensive choices, but it adds dimension to a figure previously seen as one note. It reveals a man at war with himself, someone whose art was always a battleground between the image he sold and the soul he buried. The Cedar Sessions don't just shock, they deepen the mystery. Because now the question becomes, what else did David Allan Coe keep hidden? If this level of vulnerability existed in him all along, what other truths were sacrificed for the sake of the outlaw legend? And if he could suppress this work for nearly 50 years, what does that say about the relationship between fame and authenticity? Music historians are already grappling with these questions. The implications ripple beyond just one man. They touch on the mechanisms of the music industry, the masks artists wear, and the burden of expectation. Coe, in choosing not to release the Cedar Sessions, didn't just withhold songs, he withheld the full story of himself. And that ultimately may be the most shocking part of all. No aftermath has yet unfolded. No official re-release, no public statement, no remix or remaster. The mystery may be solved, but the silence from Coe's camp remains as deafening as ever. Perhaps that's how he intended it. Perhaps the songs were never meant to be heard. But now that they've emerged, blinking in the light of day, there's no turning back. The legend of David Allan Coe will never be the same. The rediscovery of the Cedar Sessions and their exposure to the world have sparked an unprecedented reaction. not merely because of what they are, but because of what they aren't. In an age where artistic vulnerability is often calculated, packaged, and marketed as a commodity, the rawness of these recordings stands apart. They are untouched by time, trend, or commercial ambition. What's surfaced isn't just a hidden album, it's a time capsule of a man wrestling with truths too personal, too uncomfortable to share with the world he had spent so long entertaining, shocking, and polarizing. What's most compelling now is what this says about the inner dynamics of Coe's career and psyche. The man who once defined himself through transgression, who gleefully broke taboos and poked at the edges of cultural comfort, had, all along, nurtured a side of himself that sought connection on quieter, more intimate terms. And not just connection with fans or family, but with himself. Listening to the songs, described by those who've heard them as acoustic, meditative, and narratively cohesive, reveals a man deeply aware of his contradictions. The bravado, the controversy, the outlandish performances, those were masks. The real David Allan Coe, it turns out, had been talking to himself in the dark for years, pen in hand, asking questions only the silence could answer. This discovery introduces a haunting sense of duality to his life's work. The public knew him as a provocateur, a musical rebel with no filter. He played characters so convincingly, many forgot he was performing. His lyrics crossed boundaries unapologetically, and in many cases, left behind a trail of outrage. But the existence of these recordings reframes that behavior. If he was capable of the vulnerability shown in the Cedar Sessions, then every line he ever wrote in his more aggressive albums becomes suspect. Was it satire? A shield? A distraction from the man behind the microphone? The Cedar Sessions reveal an artist not just torn between personas, but perhaps exhausted by the weight of the one he chose to show the world. The implications stretch far beyond Coe's biography. They penetrate deep into the conversation about what artists owe their audiences and themselves. There is often a false assumption that once an artist finds success within a certain persona or voice, they must remain loyal to it, even at the expense of their personal evolution. In Coe's case, he appeared to take that loyalty to the extreme, never veering from the outlaw path. But the Cedar Sessions reveal that he did evolve. He simply refused to share that evolution. It suggests a man who believed his truth was either too fragile to release or too contradictory to reconcile with his public image. This tension between identity and authenticity sits at the heart of the music industry, and Coe's secret project now stands as a stark metaphor. Artists are often building walls as they perform, and the deeper truths lie behind them. He had the chance to dismantle the wall he built, to let the world in on the complexity behind the caricature. Instead, he chose silence, a silence now broken but not erased. There's also a deeply human element to all of this. Strip away the fame, the infamy, the stylized outlaw mythos, and what's left is a man who appears to have been afraid. Afraid to show softness. Afraid that opening up might unravel the identity he'd spent years cementing in the public imagination. And that fear isn't unique to celebrities or musicians. It's something universally relatable. Most people curate aspects of themselves for the world, hiding parts they fear won't be accepted. For Coe, the stakes were simply higher, the contrast starker, the consequences more profound. The Cedar Sessions have also sparked debate among critics and fans alike about the nature of artistry itself. Can an artist's most authentic work be the one they never meant to release? Is intention more important than execution? Does the act of hiding something make it more truthful than work created for public consumption? In Coe's case, it appears so. There was no polish, no label notes, no thought of radio play. The tracks are said to contain false starts, long pauses, even murmured lines that never make it to the chorus. They are songs in their purest form, unrefined expressions, never meant to be polished for public ears. It's also worth examining how this changes Coe's relationship to his contemporaries. The outlaw country movement was rooted in rebellion, but it was also filled with moments of stark emotional transparency. Willie Nelson's Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, Johnny Cash's late-era American recordings, Chris Christopherson's poetry of regret, all offered glimpses into their souls. Coe, by contrast, seemed to avoid that vulnerability. As if allergic to the sincerity his peers occasionally embraced, the Cedar Sessions reveal he wasn't lacking that sincerity, he was hiding it. Some believe this new chapter in Coe's legacy will retroactively alter the way his entire body of work is interpreted. Once dismissed by some as a fringe provocateur, he now appears as a man with a dual artistic purpose, to challenge on one hand and to confess on the other. It's a reminder that artists can be more than one thing at once, that public personas are often masks worn by people with far more nuanced stories behind them. In this case, the music isn't just telling us something new. It's demanding a re-evaluation of everything we thought we already knew. The music's mere existence also touches something sacred in the hearts of fans and archivists. So much of what is released today is curated to fit commercial molds. Rarely does something surface that's entirely divorced from the modern cycle of marketing and exposure. But this was kept in the dark not by oversight or accident, but by design. Coe wanted it hidden. That act, as much as the songs themselves, reveals a deeply complicated relationship with fame and legacy. He didn't trust the world with his vulnerability, and now that it's emerged, that decision casts a shadow over the choices he made in the public eye. Perhaps the coarse, combative songs were not just what he wanted the world to hear, but what he hoped they would use to keep their distance. The setting of the recording, described by insiders as a cabin-like studio tucked into rural Louisiana, only adds to the mystique. It wasn't a slick Nashville room with engineers watching every take. It was intimate, quiet, and detached. The environment mirrored the tone of the music, isolated, contemplative, bare. Some close to the situation now speculate that Coe chose this studio specifically because of its remoteness, because he wanted to create something that would never intersect with his public self. The Cedar Sessions may have been less a recording project and more a ritual, a way to exercise truths without the consequences of public scrutiny. And while there is currently no known plan for an official release, the hunger to hear the full recordings grows by the day. Music historians, collectors, and superfans are scrambling to verify snippets, piece together lyrics, and reconstruct the timeline. The journalist who helped surface the story has confirmed that discussions are quietly underway, but even that brings ethical dilemmas. Should these songs be released if Coe himself never intended them to be? Does their artistic value override the artist's original intent? There's no easy answer. But the shock of the revelation has cracked open an emotional reservoir for fans who've always felt conflicted about Coe. Here was a man who made it hard to love him, even as his music captivated. His most famous works were often alienating, some outright offensive, yet they were consumed because of the undeniable craft behind them. Now, hearing that beneath it all was a hidden library of reflective, poetic meditations, fans are grappling with their own reactions. The Cedar Sessions don't excuse or erase his more problematic work, but they complicate it. They add a dimension that cannot be ignored. There's also a growing academic interest in using the Cedar Sessions as a case study in identity construction. Scholars in musicology, cultural studies, and even psychology are beginning to frame the discovery within broader conversations about self-invention. David Allan Coe, it turns out, wasn't just a performer. He was a walking contradiction. And that contradiction makes him a fascinating, if uncomfortable, symbol of the American artist's struggle to reconcile inner truth with outward performance. Even the structure of the songs, according to those who've had early access, points to someone who was thinking deeply about form. These weren't throwaway experiments. The songs were deliberate in pacing, rich in metaphor, and often built around narratives that felt far removed from the swagger of Coe's stage persona. One song, as described by insiders, traces a journey through spiritual disillusionment, a stark contrast to his usual embrace of nihilism. Another is said to chronicle a dream in which the narrator speaks to a younger version of himself, offering warnings that go unheeded. These are not the ideas of a man coasting on formula, they are the work of someone actively questioning his path, even as he continued to walk it. The emotional weight of this discovery may not lie solely in what it says about David Allan Coe, but in what it reveals about us. We, the audience, often demand consistency from our artists. We want them to remain what we love them for, even if that image was incomplete or reductive. The Cedar Sessions challenge that impulse. They ask us to consider that the artists we admire or vilify contain multitudes, and that sometimes the truest expressions of art are the ones we never get to hear until it's almost too late. There's a strange silence now that follows the discovery. Not the silence of absence, but of reckoning. The Cedar Sessions are more than just lost songs. They are a mirror, one that reflects not only David Allan Coe's secret heart, but our willingness to accept complexity in those we thought we had already figured out. And in the end, that might be the most shocking thing of all. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the mystery finally being solved after all this time? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.